Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this presentation on Yolo County Diversion Programs hosted by the UC Davis Campus Community Book Project. My name is Megan Macklin, and I serve as Associate Director of Campus Climate and Inclusion Initiatives in the Office of Campus Community Relations, which is a unit in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at UC Davis. Thank you for joining us. To begin, a couple of housekeeping items for our virtual event. Captions can be accessed by clicking the live transcript button in your Zoom window. There you can show or hide subtitles and access the full transcript. Today's event is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the Book Project website. You are invited to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. We will endeavor to answer as many questions as possible. While we meet today in a virtual space, we'd like to begin by reading the following statement that acknowledges the land where UC Davis sits. We should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Quetzaltequi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzaltequi Wintun Nation, and Yocha-Dihi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. The UC Davis Campus Community Book Project promotes dialogue and builds community by encouraging diverse members of the campus and surrounding communities to read the same book and attend related events. The Book Project, a signature initiative out of the Office of Campus Community Relations since 2002, advances the mission to improve both the campus climate and community relations, to foster diversity, and to promote equity and inclusiveness. Currently in our 21st year, the Book Project in 2022-2023 focuses on the theme of transformative justice and police reform and features Defund Fear, Safety Without Policing, Prisons and Punishment by Zach Norris. Originally titled We Keep Us Safe, Building Secure, Just and Inclusive Communities, the book calls upon many systems that play a role in the imperative for community safety, including the criminal legal system, healthcare, education, food and housing access, and support for caregivers. This year's book project theme and selection will be supported by a year-long program of lectures, workshops, book discussions, film screenings, exhibits, performances, and more. Our program culminates when author Zach Norris comes to UC Davis on Thursday, February 16, 2023, to speak at the Mondavi Center for the Performing Arts. For more information about the Book Project program, visit our website, where you can find up-to-date information, registration links, and other resources. We also welcome your involvement, students, staff, faculty, and community members in selecting the Book Project feature title and in planning our annual program. If you're interested in getting involved with the Book Project, please send us an email or refer to the Book Project website for more information. Throughout today's discussion, we will uphold our UC Davis principles of community. We recognize that we may discuss sensitive topics, and we encourage you to practice self-care and seek resources when needed. You can find links to the principles of community and to the Book Project's mental health resources page on your screen. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Tracie Olson joined the Yolo County Public Defender's Office in 1998 after graduating from the University of Minnesota Law School. In 2009, she was appointed Chief Public Defender, the first woman in the history of Yolo County to hold the position. Since then, Tracie has concentrated on building a law firm that provides clients the highest quality legal representation through an interdisciplinary model where clients' needs are addressed and employees are equipped to do their best every day. She has created a record mitigation clinic, mitigation unit, post-conviction unit, mental health unit, immigration unit, racial justice committee, media team, and a wellness program. She is involved in a broad range of county endeavors, from developing law and justice strategic plans to serving on the Community Corrections Partnership Ad Hoc Budget Committee that realigned budget priorities from being law enforcement-based to treatment-based, to creating a non-statutory mental health diversion protocol with county stakeholders. She also continues to handle cases, typically those that involve allegations of homicide. Tracie has been a California Public Defenders Association board member since 2018 and is currently serving as an executive officer. She is also a credentialed California County Senior Executive. Also joining us today is Jonathan Raven, the Chief Deputy at the Yolo County District Attorney's Office. He received his undergraduate degree from UC Santa Barbara and law degree from Loyola Law School. Jonathan supervises the district attorney's mental health court and addiction intervention court teams and oversees the DA training division. He is a member of Yolo County's Justice Cabinet, which focuses on racial disparities, and a member of the statewide Prosecutor Diversity Committee. Jonathan also is an instructor at the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, where he trains police officers on the post-mandated racial profiling course. And he is also an adjunct professor at the UC Davis School of Law, teaching trial advocacy since 2005. Jonathan and Tracie, thank you so much for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Megan. You want to show that first slide? Are people seeing that? Because I don't. Do you see that, Tracie?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not seeing it, but I can go from my sheets. Okay. Sorry about that. So, well, I'm so pleased to be here. I know Tracie is too. We're partners in trying to transform the criminal justice system and make it better for everyone involved. And what you're seeing there, if it's the right slide, is a group of people standing over by what used to be Borders in Davis. And I have to say that this is the team, and the team that makes this happen is really the secret sauce for our success. And I'm very involved in cases and helping these individuals. And it's actually been probably the most fulfilling assignment that I've had since I've been here at the DA's office, and that's prosecuting quite a few cases and being in many other assignments, because I feel like it's the one time when, for the most part, everyone on this team, which we're going to talk about in a moment, we're all rowing in the same direction, and we're all making such a difference. So with that, I will go to the next slide. So what are we doing here? We're actually re-envisioning or reimagining how the criminal justice system can address those individuals who are committing crimes, and some very, very serious, but who also live with mental illness and or substance use disorders. Because as many of you know, there's co-occurring disorders where people have both a mental illness and a substance use disorder. And in the old days, and we'll get into this in a moment, for DAs, we basically looked at every individual that came across our desk as a nail. And when you're looking at a nail, what's the tool you use? A hammer. And as we've evolved in time, we've realized there are many, many other tools that we can use to achieve justice, and that people should be viewed individually and not a one-size-fits-all. So we're prioritizing treatment, but also with accountability, and not such a focus on punishment. And the question we ask ourselves in every case is, does this person need to go to state prison or jail? Is that the best place to help this person get better and move on with their life and reduce the possibility of recidivism? Or can we try something different? Next slide.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add, I am a UC Davis undergraduate graduate. So I'm a local person, local girl, been here in this office for 24 years, but a proud UC Davis graduate. As for mental health and addiction intervention courts, as Jonathan Raven had said, it's a treatment approach. And so what we try to do is look to see what the needs of our clients are, not necessarily what they did to get themselves brought into our attention, but how we can fix their lives in a way that makes them healthier, more productive, and frankly, just more well than when we got them. It's not a one size fits all. We tried, I think, in the early days, we looked at everybody, like Jonathan said, as a nail. I think this, when I say we, I'm saying the system. I don't think my office ever did, or at least we tried not to. But everybody has very, very different needs. And until you can figure out what a specific person needs and will respond to and what motivates them, you're not going to see a lot of success. And so we've learned that through failures, and we've learned that through successes. When it says public safety first, there's always a cognition that when we're treating people in the community, that they're neighbors, right? They're your neighbors and they're out in the community and they're going on with their lives. And we want to make sure we're doing it in a way that's responsible. There are different, I think, levels of what responsibility means, but certainly in a way that doesn't endanger unnecessarily people that they're going to come in contact with. And so sometimes that means we have to get them stable before we can continue in the treatment course for them, but stability first and foremost, and public safety. And thinking long-term, recidivism in my mind isn't just, did we fix everything today and you're never going to get in trouble again? There are baby steps here. A lot of our clients didn't wake up in the most severe situation of their lives. It was a progression. And so we also recognize that there's going to be a progression towards wellness. But recidivism is one thing that we do look at to make sure that people are at least getting better. And the goals of the criminal justice system besides that are to make sure people out in the community are safe. Next slide, please. As Jonathan mentioned, the secret sauce. So collaboration. Old days, and I've been in this job since 1998. And then so Jonathan and I, when we talk about the old days, I think we're talking about the 90s and the early 2000s. We really just looked at how, for my part, how can I get you out of as much trouble that you're in right now? How can I avoid a felony conviction if that's possible? How can I avoid a jail term if that's possible? How can I avoid a prison term? Now, and that was really a solo project. It was an adversarial situation. That doesn't work for everybody, and it doesn't work for every situation. There are some cases that it's going to be adversarial, we're going to have a trial, we're going to battle it out in court. But not all cases need to go that route. That's where the collaboration comes in. And it's not just the district attorney and the public defender's office, it's probation and all of our treatment partners too, which we're going to mention later. A dedicated judge, which just means a judge that gets to know the clients, not a judge that rotates through, but a judge that knows the needs and can build rapport with our clients. And then HHSA is Health and Human Services. That is our behavioral health organization here in the county. They provide primary services for those that are severely mentally ill. And for anyone that's not considered severely mentally ill, it's usually a community-based partner. Next slide, please. And I think it goes to Jonathan.
Thank you. And one of the things Tracie mentioned just now is public safety first. So again, as we've evolved back, we keep saying in the olden days, you know, DAs, and they probably still are in many counties, very, very conservative. Our number one priority is all of you and your public safety. And so any chance there was a slight risk of someone, you know, doing something violent while they're being treated in the community, we didn't want to take that risk. And what we're doing now is we're doing what I call taking calculated risks, very calculated risks, to determine whether someone is a good risk to be treated in the community, because that's the goal, rather than sending them to jail or prison. So to paint the picture of what Tracie was just talking about in terms of the team collaboration, you can see a couple of photos. And on your left is a holiday party that we had. Chris Bulkley is the person on the right there, dressed like an elf in the green jacket. He's one of our supervising deputy DAs. In the center there is one of our first judges, also a King Hall alum, Dave Rosenberg, and then Stephen Svedich, who was our probation officer since the beginning until just recently. At the top, you see us all, the team attending a conference, and it's really great the way we have buy-in from the top. So I'm the chief deputy. I'm not at the top, but we have buy-in from our DA and from the public defender, Tracie, as you can see, she's here today. But we also have, as you can see in that picture, from the top, standing on my left, is Chris Bulkley, who I mentioned earlier. Karen Larson, standing up also, was the director of Health and Human Services. And then from left to right seated is Judge David Reed, Judge Dave Rosenberg, myself in, looks like the same shirt I'm wearing now, Joe Goki from the Public Defender's Office, and the probation chief, Dan Fruitnicht. And below that is just another team shot at one of our holiday parties. So we don't always agree on everything, but we all are trying to do the right thing. Obviously, the public defender and defense counsel, they have a client they represent. Our client is you, the public. But what I like to say is, in your typical day in court, when something happens in criminal courts, it's basically a zero sum. Generally, there are winners and there are losers, and that's the way it goes. But in this court, when things work out, and they often do, everybody's a winner and everyone feels good. Next slide, please.
So for mental health court, and actually a lot of the diversion courts that we have, we're really focusing on felony conduct. There are other programs for those charged with misdemeanors, but what we're talking about today are the programs really designed for those that are accused of felony conduct. And mental health court is for those with severe mental illness. I mentioned that earlier. That's usually defined as schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, things of that nature. There are usually, not always, but usually substance use disorder issues that also need to be addressed, either because clients are self-medicating because they're not receiving the proper services, or traumas in their life that leads to substance use disorder. But it's very, very common to have both of those issues present. Mental health court, we try to look to see that the mental illness was the driving factor, or at least very, very significant in the underlying conduct. We rely on information revealed in police reports. Obviously, we rely on interactions with our clients, and we will talk to collateral people. We'll talk to their families. We'll talk to their significant others. We'll see if they have any history of substance use treatment or mental illness treatment or diagnosis, and especially if they've been on medication before. There's a ways that we identify. If we can identify people very, very early in the process, that's ideal. I think we're going to talk about that later, but if not, we'll develop that information as needed. Next slide, please. Law enforcement sometimes knows our clients from just interactions with them in the community. And law enforcement, not always, but a lot of times are aware of what our clients' issues might be. And so they can contact the district attorney's office, sometimes us, public defenders, but usually it's the district attorney's office, to flag somebody, to say, hey, listen, I ran into this person, here's the background, and they have an issue that perhaps would be ideal for mental health treatment. DA will identify it charging an intake. All that means is the district attorney's office is the first ones to get the police reports. They read through those reports when determining what charges to bring and how to proceed with the case. And that's an opportunity for early identification. And then once my office is appointed, which would be at the first court date, and then we immediately get the police reports and go out and talk to our clients. Again, early is ideal. It's not always possible. Sometimes clients need to stabilize. Sometimes clients need to kind of come to terms with what's happening to them. Sometimes clients need to trust us and trust the system. And sometimes they just need information. So what we do as defense counsel is we'll run parallel tracks. So we'll continue with the case as if it's not going to get diverted, excuse me, but still have those parallel conversations with the district attorney's office and go through the process so that clients aren't languishing, for lack of a better term, in custody, untreated, while we work out what the end product of their case is going to be. Next slide, please.
So getting back to what Tracie was saying there, this is where there's sometimes a little friction between our office and the public defender's office. And by the way, it could be also individuals represented by private counsel, or what's called conflict counsel. Conflict counsel represents individuals charged with cases where there is a conflict with the public defender. So they cannot afford representation, but for various reasons there's a conflict. And when I say that, the friction, I say that because I'm always wanting to get it done early. Let's get them in there. Let's get them in there. Let's not litigate. That's the old way of doing things, litigating, running them through the system. And I'm always calling Tracie and her counterparts, telling them, why isn't this person referred to the program? Why aren't they referred to the program? And they're constantly telling me, you know, take a chill pill, man. You know, we have to do the things that Tracie just mentioned. You know, we can't always do it right away. They might not be ready. We might need to do some litigation. There are all sorts of reasons. And I'm always pushing and I'm always impatient. But generally speaking, you know, for the right individuals, we get them referred at some point in time, and we do our best to get them into the program. So for eligibility, this is an adult program, so it's 18 and older. It's not a juvenile program. There are other programs for juveniles. You have to be a US citizen, which for many of us, we look at and we say, why? Why is that? Well, for this program, many of whom are in the program are on Medi-Cal. And so that's an issue with being a US citizen, and makes it very, very challenging to put someone in who's not a US citizen. But for those individuals that are not US citizens that are in the criminal justice system, there are other programs for them. They have to be a Yolo County resident, and that's getting back to the Medi-Cal issue. You cannot be on Medi-Cal in Yolo County unless you live in Yolo County, and it's very frequent that someone might live in a neighboring county, or maybe they're homeless and they're kind of in Yolo County, and then the public defender and our Health and Human Services Agency will help transfer their Medi-Cal to Yolo County. So they're charged with one or more misdemeanors or felonies. They can currently be on probation. The participant must agree to join the mental health court or the addiction intervention court, which is the sister court to mental health court for those with substance use disorders. And they have to agree to follow the guidelines. So they have to have buy-in. They have to want to do it. And that's getting back to the situation where sometimes early on in a case, they're not ready to. They're not ready to engage. They don't have that insight. As I said, they have to have that necessary insight and motivation. Otherwise, they're not going to succeed in the program. Some of them, this isn't ideal, but some of them initially are going to the program because they can only see one thing, door number 1 or door number 2. And door number 2 is a lengthy jail term or prison. And they want to avoid that naturally, but they aren't necessarily going into the program to get better, okay? We tend to take a very hard look at those individuals, and we tend to accept a lot of them. And the reason why we do that is because even though they don't really have the requisite insight we want to see, our program is so successful, and our treatment team, which is our probation officer and our caseworker, are so outstanding with the wraparound services and the care and attention they give to these individuals that after a certain amount of time, even though that person might not have come into the program because they wanted to get better, they wanted to avoid the prison sentence maybe, they then develop that insight. They realize how good it is. They realize that someone cares about them. Their self-esteem increases, and they start to buy in. And you see this transformation, which is pretty incredible. And that's one of the reasons why we've been successful. This last bullet point is really interesting. All the team members must agree whether participants are going to be accepted. And this is something that I think back to when we were first developing this, and I think about how this was really an issue for Tracie. I don't know if she remembers, but yes, she does. But she did not want the DA saying no, 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 no. Because, you know, maybe in the past, 20 years ago, like we talk about the old days, you know, maybe that attitude would have been a no. And you also have to realize I'm dealing with 20 or 30 deputy DAs, each who take different approaches. And that was a challenge to get them to develop and basically evolve to see how good this program is. But for us, for a variety of factors, we decided we needed, for public safety reasons and some other reasons, to have what we call a veto. Veto being any of us on the team, whether it's the public defender, Health and Human Services, probation, or the DA, could object. Now, obviously, the public defender is not going to object because it's their client. But what we found, and I remember specifically our champion judge, Judge Janet Gard, who I think is also a King Hall alum, and she told Tracie, just have some faith and trust. Okay, we need to do it this way. And Tracie did. And I think it worked out because in all the hundreds and hundreds of referrals, I think the DA, our office, has only exercised 1 or 2 vetoes in hundreds and hundreds of referrals. And that's really because we, my office and my deputy DAs, have so much confidence in the treatment team, that's probation and Health and Human Services, doing the proper assessment and making the right recommendation regarding suitability. So when they recommend someone, we tend to take with them. And case in point, I had a very troubling case where someone committed a very violent crime. And I kind of thought our deputy DA who had the case, because he was assigned the case, because it's kind of litigating on the parallel tracks, like Tracie mentioned, I was a little concerned that he might not want that individual to go into the program. And he might want to go the what I would say the traditional criminal justice route, which is jail or prison. And I said, why don't you come to our meeting and listen to the treatment team, and they will tell you why they think this person was suitable. And he told me something which really struck a chord with me. He said, yes, I will, because I generally defer to the opinion of the treatment team. And I think I venture to say that most of my deputy DAs would say that. And that's not something that I think I would have said about our deputy DAs 10 or 15 years ago. Next slide. Okay, this just really breaks it down from the mental health court. What you see there is Department of State Hospitals. That's a separate grant for people that we're trying to keep out of the state hospitals. And then on the right side, you see the Addiction Intervention Court. So as Tracie said, you need the SMI, the serious mental illness, or the substance use disorder. And then you also have to have like a causal connection. So we call that MSO, mental state at the time of offense, or on the right side, just the aggravating factor. What we don't want to put, we want to put people in this program that are committing crimes because of their mental illness and or their substance use disorder. Because if we can help get them well and stable, they're not going to commit crimes in the future. There are some people that are diagnosed with what's called an antisocial personality disorder, which many of you have probably heard of. And those are really, really tricky and difficult cases. And those are the people that aren't necessarily committing crimes because of the mental health issue or the substance use disorder. So we want to put people in the program that are committing the crimes that, but for the substance use disorder or the mental health issue, they would not be committing the crimes. Next slide.
Yeah, just to go back to the veto power, just to be clear, I still don't like that. I still don't like it. However, we have limited slots and they're always full. And so in order to get this program off the ground and moving, I felt like it was a compromise that I could make. But, you know, if we had unlimited slots, I would be fighting that a little bit harder. As far as the phases, so when you get into mental health court, it's a minimum of 18 months. The phases are orientation and treatment, early recovery, active recovery, sustained recovery, and then graduation. And we have an alumni program as well. Graduation, though, I want to be clear, sometimes they're not actually graduations, they're more called successful transitions. Sometimes we have clients that are absolutely doing the best they can, and they can't do anymore. Like they've reached the limit of what they can do in their recovery. And rather than not graduate them, we call it a successful transition. So they're still able to successfully leave the program and continue, you know, on their path. It's just that they didn't necessarily meet all of the actual terms of the 4 phases. Next slide, please.
So I want to just mention that alumni program. As you see, you're looking at a graduation here, but that alumni program, when we started the program, we didn't have that. And what we found is, you know, once someone graduated and it says 18 months, it's often up to 2 years, they still needed our support, the team support, basically. So we started an alumni program where they have to continue their involvement, not to the same degree, but so that we can sort of help support them and transition them out away from the program. So you're looking at Addiction Intervention Court graduations. The one on the left, the individual at the top, he actually had been a police officer in Hawaii many years back, and he had a serious drug addiction. And he had a huge attitude coming in. That all changed as he developed the insight, and he managed to graduate. And this, as you can see, was during COVID. We didn't let things slow down over COVID, and we did it by Zoom. And the interesting thing, the silver lining, like there's some silver linings to COVID, is that the woman you see there on the right, second row, is his daughter, and she's zooming in from Hawaii. And she would not have been able to be there but for Zoom. And these are very, very moving and powerful graduations where we'll have police officers speak at the graduation and say, you know, this is where I want to see you. I don't want to see you out on the streets where I'm putting handcuffs on you. This is how I want to see you. And you look a lot different than you did back then. One of the things that I like to do at the graduations is I walk up to, we have people in the witness chair, the graduate, as you can see there on the right, the woman who's graduating with her child, and 2 of our judges, Judge Rosenberg on the right and Judge Gard on the left. And there she is below, she's sitting in the witness chair. And I walk up and with my computer, I show them their Soundex, which is basically their mugshot, okay? And generally they'll have 4 or 5 or 6, and sometimes they just look, they don't look good, let's just say. And they looked so much better. Like you can see these individuals, when they get through this program and get well. So that's the culmination of a lot of work. And we'll have pizza, we'll have speeches, we'll have family members. Judge Rosenberg used to make a bundt cake for everyone, and Judge Guard's big thing is making her famous brownies. And it's really a situation where it's unusual the way you see these judges in particular, and the DAs, quite frankly, interact with these individuals, calling them by their first name. And it's on a friendly basis, so it's a lot different. Next slide, please. So this is mental health court. And again, on the left, you see a Zoom graduation. In the middle top is Terry, who's our caseworker. To your right is Jasmine, our probation officer. And then I just want to show you down below, on the far right is the police officer who arrested her, Gina, and she's participating. And then below in the middle, which I love, so this is the deputy, Deanna Hayes, who was originally assigned this case, okay? And as I said, it's been an evolution to see our prosecutors on the line, the ones that are doing the standard criminal prosecution, really being so pleased when cases they're prosecuting are being moved into this program. And you can see how happy she is. And then just one over on the left is Brett Banley, who's a longtime member of the Public Defender's Office. And to your right is Judge Rosenberg with one of our mental health court graduates. Next slide. A couple more graduations is Alejandra Zambrano. This was actually an interesting case because the treatment team, and that's probation and health and human services, they did not want to put him into the program because of his crime, basically, and his lack of insight. And I have to tell you that we looked at this case. So Chris Bulkley, the supervisor, who's on your far left, and I looked at this case and we watched the video. This guy was in a psychotic state, and he was basically indecent exposure, let's just say, by a school, okay? And those are always tricky cases where you have crimes involved of a sexual nature. Those are very challenging. And Chris and I looked at that video, and we just thought, this guy does not know what he's doing. He did not have bad intent here. We believed he was just actually trying to relieve himself in Davis, not that far from a school. He's homeless and having a psychotic episode. And Chris pushed and pushed and pushed, and we got him in the program, and he ended up graduating. So you can see for Chris on the far left how fulfilling that was, and for Alejandro, of course, too. And on your right, the judge who's currently our mental health court judge, who's been fantastic, as all of them have, is Judge Williams. Next slide, please.
So outcomes, there's two slides about outcomes. And this one is comparing the 12 months prior to the time they were enrolled into mental health court against, I believe, the duration of the 18 months they were actually in mental health court. So the 12 months prior compared to being in the program. And clients saw jail bed days decrease by 97%, arrests by 95%, local hospital bed days 77.5%, and state hospital bed days 100%. The difference between local and state hospitals usually are taking my clients when they're incompetent to stand trial, and so they're sent in facing felony charges. They're sent to the state hospital for competency restoration. Sometimes you'll have a mentally disordered offender. It's the label, but the law calls them not guilty by reason of insanity, but it's usually an incompetency. When someone is arrested, presents themselves to us, if they meet the legal requirements of incompetency, then they cannot be prosecuted until they regain competency. They're sent to the hospital for that purpose, and then they come back, and then prosecution resumes. So that's the difference between those two. Next slide, please. This is 12 months prior to mental health court, and I believe this is the 12-month compared to the 12 months after they've exited the program. Exited usually is for a graduation, could also be withdrawal or an opt-out. And again, you can see you would expect over time the results wouldn't be as stellar because people are going back to their life, and the support is different after they exit the program, but still very, very good results. Next slide, please.
So before I talk about this other program briefly, I want to mention something about funding, which I think we're going to talk about later in our discussion. But funding source is a key because, you know, the DA and the public defender get a certain amount of budget allotments. Then there are grants, and then there are other funding sources. So we have 30 individuals that are in mental health court, and we actually just filled it. I think we're at 29 out of 30 for the first time ever that we filled it. And so half those individuals are funded by our offices, but also some money from what's called money from the millionaires tax to fund mental illness. So as you probably know, there's a 1% tax on millionaires, and that money goes in California. We're fortunate to have this to fund all sorts of different programs. So some of the funding comes from there. And we also have a grant which funds 15 of our individuals. They're all basically being treated and served by the same staff, but we have some of those staff members are funded by the Mental Health Services Act dollars. That's the, I forgot the phrase, Mental Health Services Act. That's the millionaires tax. So Tracie and I sat down a year or so ago, and we decided, or we thought, you know, there's an underserved population, because you heard the felonies and some misdemeanors. And we thought, well, what about those other individuals that are underserved, and maybe people that have a mental illness, but they don't have a serious mental illness? Because that's, as you can imagine, a small portion of all the people out there, including many of us, that have some sort of mental illness. Okay, so we decided to get together and write a proposal for the community, to get funding from the Community Corrections Partnership. And you heard that phrase, you probably forgot about it in Tracie's bio. That's money we get from the state based on realignment, which is a whole different story. But Tracie and I wrote a proposal, and we ended up getting funding for a public defender, DA, probation officer, and for the treatment providers, which is Communicare. It's not with Health and Human Services, it's with a community-based organization, Communicare. And we wrote this proposal, and we rallied and lobbied to get, you know, some of the votes we needed to approve it. And, you know, we both thought, how can you turn down a proposal where you have the public defender and the DA both, you know, walking into that room arm in arm and asking this group to provide some funding for something that's so important? So we created this mental health diversion program. Next slide, please.
It's also for adults. It's also for those charged with felonies, but it can be those charged with misdemeanors. It's hard to identify sometimes those charged with misdemeanors that we want to put into a program that's very, very intense like this. However, there's also, on the other hand, you don't want to wait for someone to commit a felony in order to give them help. So this program's open to either. It's a lot of the same criteria, except for, as Jonathan said, you don't have to be severely mentally ill. And this is designed to be less intense, which hopefully is more attractive to people that you know, don't need what mental health court provides, which is very, very intense, very, very wraparound. And so this is to serve people through diversion. Not all cases are diversion. And let me just talk about diversion for a second. Pure diversion means you don't enter the criminal justice system. You're diverted away from it. And we have some pure diversion programs. We refer to these as diversion, but what we're really doing is diverting them from sometimes a conviction, diverting them from jail or prison sentences. So I don't want it to be confused. We're using diversion probably improperly sometimes, but that's what we mean by these diversion programs. And then next slide, please. And these are the components. Communicare is the community-based organization. If you saw the term CBO, that's what that means, community-based organization. Communicare has been around in our community for probably longer than I've been here in the office, since the 90s. And they provide primary health and behavioral health services to those that don't have a severe mental illness. And again, these are the components of the mental health diversion program. Next slide, please.
And this again is a photo of our Zoom first mental health diversion meeting. we were so happy that we grabbed Judge Gard, who you can see there, third row down, second from the left, out of retirement. She said it was her favorite assignment doing mental health court, and she's now our mental health diversion judge. I think it's about 6 to 8 months in, and we have a 30 capacity of 30. I think it's at about 29 now, so that's almost maxed out now too. And really, Communicare has been a seamless transition, over from the staff at Health and Human Services. You can see up on the top left is our jail commander. So a number of people that are in these programs are in the jail, so it's really important that we have the sheriff as a partner, and that program is going really, really well too. So we do have some other programs. We have something called, which we don't want to get too much into because it's a whole other 1 hour discussion topic, and that's our restorative justice partnership. Some of you may be familiar with this. It used to be called neighborhood court. And so we have many individuals that are in that program that also have mental health issues and substance use disorders. So we have a number of programs. One of the things that we're starting, which is very exciting, that Tracie and I talked about, and then she went to our director of Health and Human Services and said, hey, Karen, can we get funding for 1 or 2 navigators? Because from the Mental Health Services Act, right, allotment. Because right now we have all these programs that we've mentioned, and people try to figure out the public defender, the DA makes a recommendation, the public defender refers to mental health court or mental health diversion or restorative justice partnership. And what we figured would work really, really well if we had individuals with expertise, not only on the mental health side, but also some expertise or background in the criminal justice system, so they could kind of be the gatekeepers, navigators, and get the case, and then basically say, this person should likely be referred for mental health court or addiction intervention court or mental health diversion or restorative justice partnership. So we've hired those individuals. They're not yet up and running yet, but we're getting excited about having them in place. And that concludes the formal part of the presentation. I think, Megan, now you want to move to some discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to add though, real quick, there are other diversion programs for the mentally ill that we have not talked about. Some are funded by the Department of State Hospitals in order to divert people away from the state system and treat them locally. We just started our jail-based competency treatment program within the jail to assist in that process. Like I said, there are other diversion programs, but this is what you hear about the most, and because I think this is what we've had around the longest and the largest number of slots for our clients.
Thanks so much, Tracie and Jonathan, for that presentation. I want to invite our audience members to please feel free to add any questions you may have for our panelists in the Q&A function. I'll go ahead and moderate those questions as they come in, and I know we have a couple that have come in already. What I'll do is I'll tee up the question for our panelists, provide some context per some conversations that we all had prepared ahead of time. And as I am asking questions posed for our participants, I'll put them in chat for everyone to see. So one of the things that we had wanted to discuss as a group is challenges, controversies, myths, if you were, around our Yolo County diversion programs, as an opportunity to really break down some of the common questions that you get or misunderstandings that you may have encountered in your work. So one of the questions that we've received in chat already that I know comes up in lots of conversations like this is around cost, around funding and capacity. So I'm hoping you both could talk a little bit more about capacity and kind of how that works, and in particular, how we all here on this Zoom webinar today might look into how we can be change agents as well in moving these sorts of programs. So a specific question that we got from the audience, which I'll put in chat right now, is why aren't there more cases sent to mental health court? The potential number of cases that may be eligible are far more than the actual cases that make it to alternative courts.
So I can talk about that. So when you talk about what you saw, or the numbers that you saw, are the individuals that are found suitable. So I would say anywhere from only 20 to 30% of the cases referred are found suitable by our treatment team, which is probation and Health and Human Services, or in the mental health diversion program, it would be Communicare. And there's a whole host of reasons why they might not be eligible. Like for mental health court, maybe they don't have a serious mental illness. Maybe they're not a resident of the county. Maybe they decided it's really common that by the time we meet with them, our treatment team, they've decided they don't want to do it. So there are far more people referred to these programs than what you see in the program. And up till now, we haven't had a capacity issue. We have not had a capacity issue. We have not been full. We are full or almost full. We're not even full now. We're on the borderline of being full for the first time ever with all these programs. Mental health diversion, because it's relatively new, and for the mental health court and AIC, it just hasn't been full. We haven't had individuals that are suitable for those programs. And then on top of that, as Tracie said, there are other programs beyond what we discussed. So right now, I would say we don't have a capacity issue. As we move forward, we certainly could, as we get full and we're going to start to have waiting lists, because we really don't want to have waiting lists. If someone is eligible and suitable for the program, they should be in the program. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I have some actual numbers in last fiscal year just for mental health court. So not addiction intervention court, just mental health court. There were 75 referrals, 17 were enrolled. So that's a 23% acceptance rate. In the current fiscal year, 21-22, there are 76 referrals, 12 enrolled. That's almost a 16% enrollment rate. The reason for the denials in order of prevalence were participant declined or no response. Sometimes that means the case was resolved in an alternative way. So they got their needs met in a different way. Insufficient insider motivation as determined by the treatment team. Not suitable for community supervision, meaning that the treatment team thought that they wouldn't be successful in the community, so they feared public safety. Not severely mentally ill, not a county resident, and then lastly, attorney withdrew the referral, and that's usually by client, well, it's always by client request. So those were the reasons in order, and that's one of the reasons that we created the mental health diversion through CCP, is because it killed me every time a client wanted to participate, but was told you're not motivated or you don't have insight. And sometimes it's a stability issue. And I'm not necessarily saying the treatment team's wrong. Sometimes I think they are, but I'm not saying that here. But if they want to participate, then how do we get them stable enough so that they're accepted? Or if they're not severely mentally ill, like that's kind of a catch-22, right? You want treatment, you want help. We know you're mentally ill, but you're not severely mentally ill, so we're not going to accept you. That's why we created mental health diversion in county resident. There's a lot of fluidity between our county and Sacramento, especially. And as Jonathan had mentioned before, sometimes the homeless population, the unhoused, will be housed in Sacramento, sometimes West Sacramento, etc. So it always killed me to see people that expressed that they're in interest but weren't accepted. And that's exactly why we formed mental health diversion. I don't think we have enough slots. I think that I know that our California jails in general are usually high proportion are mentally ill. And I don't know if that's because, and it's gone up over time. I have that stat too. I'll figure it out, and you can go on to the next question and then I'll come back with that answer.
I just want to add one thing. What's really sad is, and this is what Tracie's alluding to, sometimes people are just too ill. I just got an email from someone on the team that was trying to meet with an individual for our Department of State Hospitals grant. And she said they tried to meet with her 3 times, but she wouldn't meet with her, probably because she's too ill to engage. Where I see a huge problem is not necessarily or only in the criminal justice system, but the mental health treatment outside the criminal justice system is just not very good at all. And one of the ways that we can make a difference, people that have been not able to get well for years and years and years, and I see this a lot with moms of young men and young women, okay, their children, adult young men and women. Seems to be mostly moms that I talk to, and the individual, their adult child has been ill for a number of years, and the mental health system has not helped them. And now they're in the criminal justice system. And where we are able to help them is something that's a little bit controversial. And the word is coercion. So we have a little bit of coercive ability. As I said, earlier, where someone could be facing a worse outcome, maybe going to prison because they committed a pretty horrific crime, but we feel they're a good risk and we can get them better. And they choose to go into the program, not at that moment because they want to go into the program, but because they don't like the other option. And where we run into extreme challenges is our misdemeanor individuals who commit misdemeanors, because there's not a lot of, you don't have the same bad outcomes that you have for felonies that are more serious. So a lot of times with the misdemeanor cases, a lot of times they'd rather just take the consequences, which are pretty minor, for the misdemeanor, where we're trying to get them into the program, but they don't want to because they'd rather take an easier road, because quite frankly, going to these programs takes a lot of work and energy and effort, and they're maybe not ready to do that. And sometimes I think in my mind, which is, I really hate the fact that I think this, but I think, you know, that person is just going to have to commit a felony. There's a young man who has some mental health issues and substance use issues. He lives in Woodland, and I'm constantly talking to his mom, and he constantly gets arrested for a very minor drug charge. He goes into custody, he gets out. We try to get him into a program. He goes to the program, he leaves. And I'm just thinking, what's really sad is until he commits a felony where we're going to have some leverage, we're not going to be able to help this young man unless, and hopefully this will happen, unless he decides he wants to get well and wants to get better. And hopefully that will happen, because that's the best outcome, because we don't want people, you know, to be committing felonies. You know, that's not the goal here.
Thank you. I see we have a number of questions that are falling within a category of the impact in the criminal justice system that diversion programs like the ones that you described might be able to make a difference in. So Jonathan, you started the presentation by talking about the importance at looking at individuals and looking at their individual circumstances and seeing the human that's behind the story to all this. But at the same time, when we think about transforming the criminal justice system, diversion is certainly a promising area. So I want to ask a couple of questions in this area. The first I'm putting into chat now, and please bear with me, it's a little bit of a long one. This is from one of our participants. What is your team doing to make sure that your clients feel fairly represented and understood in terms of their background and culture, aka clients of color? There is a lot of trust lost within the system given the racial issues and bias in law enforcement and the judicial system. And so I find that a lot of people in the public will avoid these types of programs because they feel underrepresented. Or has this not been an issue expressed by your clients?
And I can say distrust in the system is an issue expressed by my clients. I think it's very, very real. And it's something, it's complex. As far as them being, I'm looking at the question right now. The best I think that my office can do right now is let clients see themselves represented in us, meaning, you know, people with the same experiences as them, people with the same issues, maybe with them, people with lived experiences themselves, or people that are of color as well. And then build some sort of rapport with that client so that when we say, hey, we have this thing called mental health court, do you want to participate? They don't feel like, or they feel that it's something that was designed for them rather than for somebody else. That's really the best thing I think we can do right now. It's a lot of, I mean, diversity and inclusion and equity and all those issues are something that the county, I think, wrestles with as my office does. We have training after training after training. We're changing our recruitment methods to better represent the clients that we serve. But I don't know if I have a better answer than that right now.
And for us, you know, you use the word clients, so that was a question for Tracie, because these are her clients, but obviously we're part of this too at the DA's office, as is every other member of the criminal justice system. And so, you know, we've developed a commons data transparency portal, which shows us boatloads of data, sliced and diced in many different ways. But one of the areas that we're looking at is racial diversity, to understand what we're doing and cases coming in and where there's disparity and how we're handling them, and then trying to make changes based on what we're seeing. So one example of that is we know that people of color tend to have more lengthier criminal histories. And in one of our diversion programs, Restorative Justice Partner, we had a policy that if you had a felony within 1 year or a misdemeanor within 3, you were not eligible immediately, not even looked at. And we felt that that had a disparate impact on people of color because of their criminal histories, which goes back to systemic racism and all sorts of things you could talk about in terms of that person growing up and before they were even born. And we decided to change our policy so that individuals are no longer excluded because of criminal history. Doesn't mean they'll be found suitable, but they're not going to be excluded. And as Tracie said, she mentioned recruitment. And there's so many different areas we could talk about. And this is a whole other, hour or more discussion. But recruitment, we're trying to diversify among our ranks because it's important that people coming into the system for this trust issue that you just mentioned in this question that Tracie talked about, it's important they see people that look like themselves, whether that's a Latino or Black or Asian. And quite frankly, we have a fair number of Latino prosecutors, but we only have one Black prosecutor. And although, the population in Yolo County is small for the Black population, we still have, they're definitely overrepresented. There's just a disparity there. And it's important that they feel that they can trust the system. So that's just one of the small things that we're trying to do in terms of diversifying to increase that trust level.
Thank you. I know that we could really continue on this topic area, and I do want to recognize we have more audience questions in this area, but looking at some of the other questions that you all have submitted, I'm going to move on to a new topic. We've had a number of questions regarding cases that are going through the CPS system. So the first question, I'll put it into chat: Child Protective Services. Does the Public Defender's Office contract out legal representation for CPS cases? If so, how does this intersect with mental health and addiction intervention court?
CPS attorneys, so any child that is taken from their parents through CPS is assigned an attorney to represent their interests, sometimes in CASA as well, a court-appointed special advocate, but an attorney. And the parents are. The father gets an attorney, the mother gets an attorney. None of that is within the scope of the Public Defender's Office. All of that is contracted by the court. They have funding to do that, and they contract with non-public defender employees or for a firm to do that. Long time ago, long time ago, the court paid the public defender to do it, but it's a long tortured story. I won't go into it, but we haven't done that for a very, very long time. And it's not something that's within our mandate under the government code. So that's not something we did. I can tell you a very, very long time ago, there was a mental health court for parents struggling with addiction and related issues that we've talked about today that operated very similar to mental health court and addiction intervention court. And the goal was to return children to their parents. But that was, like I said, I've been here since 1998. I want to say that was like in 99, 2000 that was going on. And I don't think it's been going on for the last 15, 20 years at least.
We also received a question about folks who might be going through a CPS process, if there is eligibility available for them for some of the programs that you talked about. So could one of you specifically address that question?
Certainly, if they were, I would say, criminally justice involved, so for someone that has a CPS case, let's say a mom, if they're not involved in the criminal justice system, there'd be services for them in the county, hopefully. If they are involved in the criminal justice system, certainly they would be someone who would be considered for one of our programs if, they're committing crimes and they're committing crimes because of their mental illness or substance use disorder.
But yeah, you're right. Jonathan's 100% right. Health and Human Services that treat those with severe mental illness, and CommuniCare that treat those with not severe mental illness and also treat those with substance use disorders, they existed long before mental health court and addiction intervention court. So anybody can go to the county, and as long as they're eligible for county services, and anybody can go to CommuniCare and get treatment. You're just not going to necessarily be through the criminal justice umbrella.
Thank you. So I know we're approaching 1 o'clock, but if Jonathan, you and Tracy are okay with it, may I ask one more question around more topic? All right, so I'm going to put these questions in the chat. We had a couple of questions come in regarding services for our unhoused community. The first is, does the diversion system refer to residential treatment centers and where? And a related question, how do these programs address the housing needs of unhoused clients?
Nearly everyone who goes into mental health court or addiction intervention court goes into a residential treatment program. Some of those individuals are homeless, many are not, but they need a higher level of care, and they can't really be treated, where they're living at the current time, or they might be homeless. So we have some programs in Yolo County, or some residential treatment programs, and then in some of the counties outside, but there's certainly a shortage of housing, and that's a big issue right now that the county is trying to address. An issue not only for people that we're talking about, they're criminally justice involved, but for the homeless. I actually just took a tour last week of Paul's Place, which is over in Davis by the Little League fields, which I used to frequent quite a bit with my sons. And it's incredible what they built there. They built this 3 or 4 story building, not only for people to live temporarily, for people to live permanently. They're small apartments, also for the homeless to go in and have a roof over their head and get a warm bite to eat. So if you have not taken a tour or visited, they're not open yet, but it's really, really incredible. But the bottom line is housing is a huge, 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 huge issue in this county, obviously far beyond the criminal justice system. But even in the criminal justice system, a lot of what we talk about when we don't need to send someone to a residential treatment center is what's called board and cares, or room and boards. And those are houses that have maybe 4 or 5 people with someone that rents them out and assists them. And there's almost none of them in Yolo County, which is horrible that we can't find those types of facilities for people to live in Yolo County. And so I don't know what we need to do in terms of incentivizing people to, purchase or use their houses for these purposes. But that's a big problem and a big challenge in Yolo County. And I'm sure Tracie has some comments on this too.
Yes, quite a few years ago, myself and Rochelle Gayton from the probation department, we got together and found some funding. We found like 300, when I say found, it's a long story, but we got about $300,000 in funding, and we bought a house. And it's maintained by the Yolo County Housing Authority under like $1 lease or something like that. But we bought this house free and clear for clients of probation to go into, to bridge themselves between residential treatment and independent living. And it's in a residential neighborhood. Neighbors were not very happy at first. And when the clients moved in, it is the best maintained house on the block. There's no problems there. There's not police rolling in. There's not probation rolling in. They're supervised, but not rolling in a manner that they have to fix a problem that's been going on. It has been a tremendous success. And I had this dream that we were going to just replicate that everywhere. We were going to buy a house in Davis and another house one that we've had we've even found funding to do that. We got $1 million to do that. And the neighborhoods didn't want it. And we're so loud about it that it didn't happen. So it's been a very frustrating thing. It's not that a couple houses were going to solve our problem, but it was going to solve a problem for a few people. And we just couldn't get it done because the community didn't want it. Very, very frustrating. But yes, overall, housing is a significant issue here and everywhere else in California.
Thank you. And I just want to apologize to our audience. Unfortunately, we won't be able to ask any more questions, but I want to leave on that note, Tracie. You're bringing up the issue of stigma around housing access, around mental health, and around addiction. And I think that's an area where it's particularly inspiring to see your work as part of a movement to help address that stigma and to help, see what role the criminal legal system can play in mitigating that stigma. So to close us out, I want to first thank everyone for joining us again. We did record this session, and the recording will be made available on the Book Project website. And I also want to invite folks on behalf of the Campus Community Book Project to join us for our next program. Next Thursday, October 27th at 3:10 p.m., UC Davis Cinema and Media Studies professor Jesse Drew will be opening up his Introduction to Documentary Studies class to host a screening and discussion with filmmaker RJ Lozada. All are welcome at this free event. And finally, we welcome your feedback on today's event and invite you to complete a brief survey, which you can access via the QR code or web address listed on the screen. As an incentive and thank you for your participation, at the end of the survey, you'll have an opportunity to enter into a prize drawing for a copy of this year's book project selection. Jonathan, Tracie, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's always inspiring to hear about your office's work and the collaboration that you're doing. Thank you to our participants for joining us today, and we hope to see you at a future program.